Masechet Pesachim Daf Ayin, a fascinating discussion about the Korban Hagigah. In addition to Korban Pesach, there's also an obligation to bring, it's a shilamim, that's special for celebrating the holidays. The whole Masechet Hagigah, we'll get to soon, but now we're talking about specifically as regards to Pesach. When is it offered and how is it offered? Mishnah teaches, Ematai mebi Hagigah imo. When do we bring the Korban Chagigah together with the Korban Pesach? Now, when we do bring it, it would be offered on the 14th at the same time as the Korban Pesach. Bizman shehu ba bahol. We only bring Korban Chagigah when it's the 14th of Nisan is a weekday. In other words, we're not going to violate Shabbat to bring Korban Chagigah. We already had that big discussion. Do we violate Shabbat even for Korban Pesach? And Hillel had to convince Bnei Betara that we do. But for Korban Chagigah, that's not as important as Korban Pesach. So you wouldn't violate Shabbat for it. Okay, we'll see. That's the Mishnah's opinion. We're going to see one opinion later on, controversial opinion that disagrees with this and says you bring Chagigah even on Shabbat. Also, betahora, we only bring Korban Chagigah when the majority of Israel are in a state of purity. And so that they bring Korban Pesach in the state of purity, then they bring Korban Chagigah also. But if the majority of the community is tameh, and in that case, they still are allowed to bring Korban Pesach bitum'ah, that's fine for Korban Pesach, but you're not going to go and also bring Korban Chagigah in the state of Tum'ah, right? We're not going to override Tum'ah for Chagigah. Ubemu'at, and also you only bring Korban Chagigah when there's a small portions for each person. In other words, the Korban Pesach, for one korban, for one lamb, you have a whole group of people, 100 people. And so each person is only going to get a small bite. So you need more food because you want to eat the Korban Pesach when you're nearly full. You don't want to eat the Korban Pesach in a ravenous way, just stuffing it down your throat because you're so hungry. It's not a respectful way. So you want to fill up your stomach with something else. So you bring Korban Chagigah. And then you would have just the last bite, which would be a kezait from the Korban Pesach. However, if the portions are big and there's only a few people for Korban Pesach, then there's no need to bring Korban Chagigah. So only if you have all three of these criteria would we bring Korban Chagigah. Korban Chagigah is not mentioned explicitly in the Torah. We derive it, as we'll see in a few minutes, right? But so it's not absolutely necessary. So bizman shehu ba bashabat bimrube ubetuma en mivin emo chagigah. However, if any of these, if it's Shabbat, or if there are big portions, or if people are tameh, then we do not bring the Korban Chagigah with the Korban Pesach. Good. Next halacha, Chagigah hayta ba'a min hason. When you do bring a Chagigah, here's the definitions. It can be brought from son min habakad. In other words, from son is from sheep. Small animals. Bakad is from big animals, meaning like cows, mina kebasim, mina izim, sheep, goats, mina zecharim, and nekebot, male, female, basically anything. And you can eat it that day, the night, and the next day. In the case of Korban Pesach, if you bring it with Korban Pesach, it would really be the night and the day. But in general, the Korban Chagigah is a shelamim, so therefore 2 days and the night that's in between. All right, good. Now that we saw those laws, the Gemara is going to ask a very important question, which it doesn't always ask, which is, why is this Mishnah here? What does it have to do with anything that we said before? Right, we were talking about other things that what you can do on Shabbat and what you can't do on Shabbat in terms of the shechitan, the preparations. We saw the Eliezer. What does this have to do with us? What did we learn before that now you're all of a sudden going to Chagigah? Shabbat. Oh, the common denominator are these are both things that you do not override Shabbat. Just like bringing the lamb for the Pesach from outside the Techum or carrying it, that does not override Shabbat because you could have done that before. So now we bring something else. The Korban Chagigah does not violate Shabbat. Looks like the Gemara is really trying to hammer home this point, precisely because there is someone that's going to disagree with this in a few minutes. And that's why we say, oh, when do we bring with the Korban Pesach Chagigah? Only when it is a weekday, and that's how it links to what came before, and also it has to be in purity and there has to be small portions, so you need more meat. Good. Maravashe Shema Amina Hagigat Arba Asar Lav Chobahi Disakada Te Chobahi Tete Bashabat Vetete Bimrube Vetete Betumah. So we can learn from here that the Chagigah on the 14th is not an absolute commandment. It's not an obligation, because if it was an obligation, then you would have to bring it no matter what. You'd have to bring it on Shabbat. You'd have to bring it even if you had enough Pesach and food, and you would have to bring it even Betumah. So you see from here that the one that you bring on the 14th is not, in fact, an absolute commandment. Okay, Ubemoat, there's another one that you would bring on the 15th, right? Each day would be as a separate mitzvah to bring other animals. Ubemoat mihu ma'itamatya. So now when there is, what is the reason that you would bring it if there was, portions are small, right? When the Pesach sacrifice is split with a lot of people and the portions of that are small, why do you bring also a chagiga? As we said, Kidetanya, chagiga ba im Pesach ne'echelet techila, kedeshia Pesach ne'echal al hasoba. That we bring a korban chagiga so that you would eat that meat first, and that way, when you're almost full, so then that way it's clear that you're eating the korban Pesach, not just because you're hungry and it's a nice steak here, but rather you're eating it specifically for the mitzvah. And then it's done in a way that's respectful of the obligation and of the atmosphere of Pesach. That we're satiated, we're enjoying this just for itself, just for the mitzvah. Okay, now we discuss the next part. Nechelet l'shnei yamim. Matnitin de la keben tema. This Mishnah that describes the Korban Chagiga must be that it disagrees with Ben Tema. Ben Tema is probably the same as Yehuda Ben Tema, who says Have Az Kanamer, right? The famous one from Pirkei Avot. Okay, he's a Tana. Sometimes it's called Rabbi Yehuda, but here just Ben Tema. This is maybe before he got Samicha. The Tanya Ben Tema Omer Chagiga ba im haPesach harehi kaPesach ve'ena nachelet ela leyom va'layla. Okay, in our Mishnah, we said that the Korban Chagiga, and just describing the one that you would bring on the 14th, is eaten for 2 days and 1 night. Now, this must disagree with Ben Tema, because Ben Tema says the Chagiga of the 14th, the one that you bring on Pesach, has the same laws as a Pesach, and therefore can only be eaten for 1 day and 1 night. In other words, you have to stop eating it at night, just like you have to finish the Korban Pesach at night, and you can't leave over any to the morning. So too, the Korban Chagiga that you bring on the 14th, you can eat that night, but you cannot leave any over the next morning. And that is not what it says in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says you can eat it the next day also. So we see that the Mishnah is not the opinion of Ben Tema. In general, Ben Tema is going to closely connect the Chagiga and the Pesach and say that the Chagiga you bring on the 14th has many or even all the laws that are applied to Pesach, since it's being brought together. Okay, so far we just saw about the timing. Now, besides that, he teaches also about another Chagiga, Chagigat Chamisha Asad, another Shilamim that you'd bring for the celebration of the holiday, that you bring it on the 15th, meaning on the first day of Yom Tov. That one, he agrees, you could eat it on the 15th, on the night of the 16th, and then on the day of the 16th also. The Chagiga you bring on the 14th is different than the one you bring on the 15th. So let's say I designate an animal to be a 14th day Chagiga, and for some reason I didn't do Shechita. I cannot now use it on the 15th. The 15th has to have something that's its own designation. Instead, I can use it for a Shalmei Simcha. There's another type of Korban. Since you say, V'samachta b'chagecha, how do you enjoy the festival? By having a beautiful meal and having meat. And so this is a different kind of Shalamim, but it's a catch-all. Even if you designate it as something else, then you can still make it a Shalmei Simcha, but not a Shalmei Chagiga of the 15th. Okay, that's the end of the Baraita. And so now we're going to go back and analyze Ben Tema more. My Tama de Ben Tema, why does he say that the Korban Chagiga that is brought on the 14th with the Pesach, how come you have to eat it that night and you can't leave it over to the next day like a usual shalamim. כדמתנה רב לחייה ברה, ולא ילין לבוקר זבח חג הפסח. Do not leave over till the morning the sacrifice of the holiday of Pesach. So zevach chag, those two words, ze chagiga hapasach kemashma'o. So rather than take it all as one phrase, the one sacrifice of the holiday of Pesach, which sounds like just the Pesach sacrifice, he's splitting this up into zevach chag, that's the chagiga, and the Pesach is the Pesach, and for both of them, lo yalin laboked, you can't have it till the morning. Lo yalin. Good, that's his source. All right, so far we proved that Ben Tema is not the author of the Mishnah, our Mishnah, because our Mishnah permits eating the Korban Chagiga of the 14th, even the next day of the 15th. But Ben Tema says it has the same laws, same time period as Korban Pesach. How about other aspects of it? Ben Tema ne'echelet sali or en ne'echelet sali, the Korban Chagiga, does it have to be roasted like the Korban Pesach or not? When we just said that we connected the Chagiga to the Pesach, was that only for the law of not leaving any leftovers till the morning? Aval sali law, but it was not talking about the way that you cook it. Or maybe there's no difference. And yes, just like the Korban Pesach is connected for Lina, so too is connected for roasting, and the Korban Chagiga of the 14th has to be roasted, which is unusual because no other Korbanot are roasted. But this one is with the Pesach, so it brings along the same definition. That's the question. I'm going to answer, yes, in fact, it does have to be roasted. We say in the Manishtana, okay, we don't say this one anymore, but in the original questions, there used to be actually 3 questions if you look in the manuscripts of the Mishnah, and one of them is, on all of the nights, we eat all kinds of meat, no matter how we prepare it, but this night, we eat only roasted meat. What do you mean you eat only roasted meat? If you bring a Korban Chagiga, so the Korban Chagiga could be prepared in any way you want, right? Obviously not. Since we say this night all roasted, that means that even the Korban Chagiga must be roasted. And Chisda explained that this has to be only according to Ben Tema, because according to the other sages, Korban Chagiga has its own laws. It has laws like a regular shalamim, and it could be until the next day, and so therefore it would be boiled and not roasted. Okay, good. So the Mishnah in Arvei Pesachim later would in fact be like Ben Tema, and Ben Tema, yes, would say that has to be roasted. All right, so now we know regarding the time period and the roasting, but how about other aspects? Ben Tema ba min habakar or na ba min habakar? Can you bring Korban Chagiga from a cow or not? We know that Korban Pesach cannot be a cow. It has to be a lamb or a goat. So how about Korban Chagiga? Ba'min hanekebot or en ba'min hanekebot? Can it be brought from female animals or not? The Pesach has to be only males. So does it have to be males only, like Korban Pesach? Or can it be like regular shalamim? Bat shanim or ena bat shetena? Can we bring something from a 2-year-old animal, or has to be a 1-year-old animal like Korban Pesach? Okay, good question. So when we made a comparison up above between Chagiga and Pesach, was that for the way that we eat it, meaning the time and the cooking, but not for everything? Or maybe it doesn't matter. And even in the type of animal and the age of the animal, it also has to be the same as Korban Pesach, according to Ben Tema. We're going to answer, yes, in fact, it has to be the same. Tashema, Chagiga ba'amin Pesach, harehi ka Pesach. Here's a braita that says that the Korban Chagiga that you bring on the 14th with the Korban Pesach has the same laws as Pesach. Ba'amin ason, ve'namin habakar, it can only be a lamb, not a cow. Ba'amin hazecharim, ve'naba'amin hanekebot, has to be male, not female. Bat shenata, ve'nah ba'a, bat sheteh shanim, has to be 1-year-old, not 2-year-old, just like Korban Pesach. Can only be eaten that night, that day, and that night, not the next day. It has to be roasted. And has to be only eaten for those who register for it in advance. Also, all these laws are just like Korban Pesach. Now, this braita is anonymous, so who is it? Man shemat le de'it le haise bara ben tema. Who says all these things? Well, we know that Ben Tema is the only one that says that can be in that night and not the next day. So this is certainly not Rabbanan. Shema mina kulehu milta ba'aynan shema mina. Therefore, the entire Baraita is in fact the opinion of Ben Tema, and he requires all of these things. So yes, even in the type of animal, the Korban Chagiga of the 14th has to be the same as the designation for Korban Pesach. All right, and the last question on Ben Tema. Ibayalehu Ben Tema, yesh ba mishum shibirat ayasem or en ba mishum shibirat ayasem ha'ayasem. One of the laws of Pesach is that says ve'esem lo tishberu bo. We may not break a bone of the Korban Pesach, has to be roasted whole. Is that true for Korban Chagiga also? Or can we break the Korban, cut the Korban Chagiga into different parts? On the one hand, we can say yes, even though it's true that the pasuk before connected Pesach and Chagiga, but regarding Pesach, it says "Ve'esem lo tishberu bo." Bo means only in Korban Pesach you cannot break it apart, but not Chagiga, right? So the bo is a limiting word. According to that, Chagiga you would be able to cut up into pieces. Or dilmahai bo. Or maybe bo is limiting something else, that only a valid kosher korban pesach, you have this law that it cannot be broken up. But let's say it was a korban pesach that became disqualified for whatever reason, taref, and so that one you could break up. So maybe bo is a designation within korban pesach and has nothing to do with chagiga, but chagiga also would have the same law that could not be cut up. Okay, so that's the question. Does Ben Tema does Ben Tema think that Chagiga has to be roasted whole, or it can be roasted in parts? Tashema Sakin. So this is a Mishnah in Masechet Shekalim that says if you found a knife, Sakin shouldn't be said Barba Asad, Shochet Ba Miyad. You're in Jerusalem, right? You're walking around and you find a knife there. You don't know whose it is, so you're allowed to use it. The question is, can you assume that the knife is tahor, or do you have to go and do tevilah? If you found it on the 14th, then you can assume that I don't know who brought it, but whatever is doing here, they probably brought it for Korban Pesach. And since they knew that they're going to be using it for Korban Pesach, and it has to be tahor, they probably put it in the mikveh on the 13th. And so now it's kosher, so I can just take this knife and I can use it immediately. Okay, so that's good for the knife. For the shechita knife. If, however, I found the knife on the 13th of Nisan, then I have to go and immerse it again, assuming that I'm not sure if the person immersed it or not, so I don't know if it's again or not again. But the point is, on the 13th, the person, people are usually going to wait till the last minute to kosher their knife, because otherwise you're going to kosher it way before. Then there's more of a chance that something might touch it in the meantime. So I found it on the 13th, then I have to assume, no, maybe the person didn't get a chance to do tevilah yet. So that in that case, I have to do it myself. That's for the shechita knife. But besides that, what if you find kupitz, a cleaver? Cleaver is not used for shechita. It's not a special sharp knife for shechita, but rather this would be a large knife, like this is an actual Roman era cleaver. This would be for chopping the bones of an animal. Ben bazeh shone umatbil. Or kupitz, whether you found it on the 13th or on the 14th, you have to do tevilah. So the question is why? Why do you have to do tevilah with on the cleaver? Right? Didn't the person prepare it from before for the korban chagiga that he's going to bring on the 14th because he can break it up? Obviously not. Since we see that we assume that a person would not have dipped it in on the 13th. That means he was not expecting to use it on the 14th. He's not expecting to use it because he's going to bring Korban Chagiga, but not break any bones. So this Mishnah assumes that you do not break any bones, and that's why there's no use to make sure that the cleaver is tahor on the 13th or on the 14th. And so if I find it and I do want to use it, I have to make sure to immerse it. So there you go. The Mishnah does in fact assume that there's no use for a cleaver because both Korban Pesach and Korban Chagiga, you may not break the bones. So this in fact is a Mishnah that follows Ben Tema. Okay, now we're going to go on for a while to try to disprove this and say that Mishnah is not like Ben Tema. Anyway, Maneh ile Rabbanan Ma'ishana Sakin Matbil Chazia Pesach Kopis Nami HaChazeh LaChagiga. Who is the author of this Mishnah? If we say it's Rabbanan, what's the difference between a shechita knife that you assume that was immersed because you need it for Pesach? Kupitz also you should assume it was immersed because it has to be tahor for the Karban Chagiga to break its bones. But we don't say that. Ela lav de ben temahi ushma mina yesh ba mishum shebirat etzem. So therefore, the Mishnah must be ben tema, and we learned that according to ben tema, you're not allowed to break the bones of a Korban Chagiga. Okay, so that is in fact what the Mishnah sounds like. But we're going to make, this is one of the most radical, far-fetched okim tot that you'll find. Watch what they do. Lo leolam Rabbanan hugon sheba b'Shabbat. No, you know what? The Mishnah is in fact the opinion of Rabbanan, and we're talking about a case where the 14th of Nisan fell out on Shabbat. And that's why we're not bringing chagiga at all. So that's why the knife that you find, the knife has to be betada because we're going to do Korban Pesach. But the cleaver that you find is we should not assume it's tahor because we're not going to bring chagiga at all because it's Shabbat. But if it was during the week, then you're right. Then you could use the cleaver and assume that it's tahor also, because you do break bones. So if we assume that Mishnah is on Shabbat, okay, this doesn't work. However, the continuation of the Mishnah Shekalim says, Chal arba'a saliot b'Shabbat. It's talking about the case of Shabbat. That means the Resha was not talking about Shabbat. If it does fall on Shabbat, shochet ba miyad, b'chamisha asar, shochet ba miyad. Then if you found a knife, if it was on Shabbat, and you find the knife, then you can use it right away. And also on the 15th, you can use it right away. Because you assume that you're going to use it for those, for the Pesach and for the Shalamim that you're going to bring on the 15th. If you find a cleaver that's tied together with the sakin, then you can assume that if he dipped one, he also dipped the other. So since the Sefer is talking about Shabbat, Miklal Deresha, Lava Shabbat Askinan. So this Ukimta does not work. Ve'ela Sheba Bimrube. So we can find another Ukimta to the Mishnah in order to show that it's not the opinion of Ben Tema. So because maybe that the Mishnah is talking about a case where when we brought it, there was large portions, all right? There's not so many people that joined this Korban Pesach. And that's why there's not going to be a Korban Chagiga. That's why the cleaver, we have to assume is Tameh because he's not going to use it. But that doesn't work either. How would the people know, the owners know that there's going to be a lot of people or less people? You never know that last minute, 20 more friends might call you and say, we want to join your Korban Pesach. And now you're going to have a little meat and you're going to have to bring a Korban Chagiga. So just in case, he would have had to dip his cleaver just in case that more people come, and then he would have to bring a Korban Chagiga. He wouldn't know that yet on the 13th whether he's going to need the cleaver or not, so he would have dipped it anyway. So that Okimta doesn't work. Maybe rather it's a case of going through every possibility that everybody was tameh, and so when everybody's tameh, you don't bring a Korban Chagiga, and that's why he didn't prepare his cleaver. But if everybody was tahor, then he would have prepared his cleaver because you would break the bones. See, so the Mishnah could be like Rabbanan. No, still, sof minayadeh. How does he know everybody's going to be tameh? Right? Something has to happen, some kind of outbreak of tumah for everyone to become tameh, and he wouldn't know that until it was the 15th. So here's why everybody's tameh. The mit nasi. The whole Mishnah must be talking about a case where the nasi died on that day. When an individual dies, the family members, prepare, become tameh for the person. But when a nasi dies, all of Israel come and participate in the burial. So that's why they all became tameh. So we're talking about a case when the nasi dies, and that's why this is in fact Rabbanan. Okay, see how this is quite a far-fetched case, but it doesn't end here. The meat nasi emat. Wait, when would the nasi have died? If he died on the 13th, then he wouldn't have dipped even the knife either, because in that case everybody's tameh. So we're going to bring the Korban Pesach betumah. So if everybody's tameh, then if you've dipped the knife, it's going to become tameh again. And anyway, you bring the Korban Pesach bitumah, so there's no need to dip the knife. So that Mishnah that said if you find a knife, then you consume as tahor. No, it wouldn't make sense if he died on the 13th. Ela demit be'arba'asar. So it must be that the Nasi died on the 14th. But if so, well, in that case, he didn't know on the 13th that the Nasi is going to die on the 14th. So on the 13th, he would have dipped both the slaughter knife and the cleaver. So there wouldn't be any difference between them. So that doesn't solve it either. Rather, final answer, the Nasi goses bishlosha asar. The whole Mishnah in Shekalim is talking about a case, didn't say anything about this, that the Nasi was about to die on the 13th because he's on his deathbed. He's going to die within a day, but we're not sure exactly when he's going to die. So sakin de had sefeka matbi'eleh. So the person heard, oh, the Nasi may die. Well, the sakin, what if he lives? If he lives, I'm going to need a sakin as tahor. So there's only one sefek, so he would do tevilah on the sakin. But the kupitz, the cleaver, the tres sefeke la matbi'eleh. But to go and bother and dip the cleaver also. So first of all, maybe he will die, and then I won't need to dip it. And even if he doesn't die, maybe there won't be so many people, and I won't need a korban chagiga. So since it's a more far-fetched that he's going to need to dip it, he wouldn't dip it at all. And that's why, based on this whole okimta, since it's this case, it's possible that the Mishnah Shekalim is not, in fact, the opinion of Yehuda ben Tema. Okay, this was quite an adventure to try to remove the Mishnah from being his opinion. But perhaps because he is a minority opinion, and in any case, our Mishnah here in Masechet Pesachim, we said is not the opinion of Ben Tema. Perhaps that's why the Gemara is uncomfortable with saying that the Mishnah Shekalim is like Ben Tema, because then you'd have a contradiction within the Mishnah. We'd rather both Mishnayot not be the opinion of Ben Tema. Still, the Manishtana question is in fact like Ben Tema, but at least not this one. Okay. Anyway, this is a fantastic limitation ukimta of the Mishnah. And now we get to yet another very interesting figure. Tanya, Yehuda ben Dortai, Perash hu vedortai beno vehalach v'yashav lo badarom. Okay, this Ben Dortai seems to be an earlier sage at the time of Hillel and Shemaya Avtalyon. And this Yehuda, the son of Dortai, he left, he and also Dortai, his son. So obviously this is Yehuda. His father's name was Dortai, and he named his son Dortai after his father. So he has the same custom just like we do. He went and removed himself and went to live in the south a few days before Pesach started. In other words, he wanted to be far away so that he would not be obligated to bring Korban Pesach. Because as it says, if you live far away, then you don't have to bring Korban Pesach because you could bring Pesach Sheni. But he would purposely go far away. Everybody's making Aliyah, La Regel, and he's the only one on the highway going the other way to go far away from Jerusalem. Why? What did he have against bringing Korban Pesach at the right time? Amar im yavo Eliyahu v'yomar lahem liYisrael mipnei ma lo chagagtem chagiga b'Shabbat mahen omerim lo. So because his opinion, Ben Dortai, was that you should, if he would only do this if the 14th was on Shabbat, and he said that when the 14th of Nisan is on Shabbat, of course you have to bring Korban Pesach like Hillel taught. But Ben Dortai thought that you have to also bring Korban Chagiga, even on Shabbat. He thought it's an absolute obligation to bring a Korban Chagiga, and so it overrides Shabbat also, against our Mishnah that we said above. And so he said, when Eliyahu comes, one day there's going to be a reckoning, and he's going to say, why didn't you bring Korban Chagiga? What will you answer? You won't have any answer. תמהני על שני גדולי הדור שמעיה ואבטליון שחכמים גדולים ודרשנים גדולים ולא אמרו להן ישראל חגיגה דוחת השבת. I am surprised that the two great sages of the generation, Shemaya and Abtalion, they are great, wise, and the speakers, the teachers of great teachers, and they did not teach Israel that we bring the Korban Chagiga even on Shabbat. Remember, we relied on their opinion to say that you bring Pesach on Shabbat, but not for this. And so he was so upset about this. He did not want to show any support for what most of the people were doing in Jerusalem. He did not want to be part of this violation of not bringing Korban Chagiga on Shabbat. Therefore, he would rather remove himself altogether so he didn't have to be chayav in the Korban Pesach and not in Korban Chagiga because he was far away. And that way, he was able to get out of the whole problem. Okay, so this is very interesting. Amar Rav, my Tama de ben Dorotai. Rav says, what is the source? Why does he think that you can bring a Korban Chagiga even on Shabbat? Ichtib. Vezabachta Pesach laAdonai Elohecha son ubakar. Pasuk in Devarim, which is very problematic because it contradicts Shemot, and it says here that you should bring Korban Pesach son or ubakar, meaning small animals like a lamb or a cow. According to Devarim, it looks like you can bring a cow for Korban Pesach. All right, then you need a really big group. But in Shemot it says, no, only from the small animals, sheep and goats. So Ela son ze Pesach. So it must be that in the pasuk in Devarim when it says son, comma, right? The son is for Pesach, and bakar must be for something else, not for Pesach. Bakar zo hagiga. Okay, so this is what I mentioned before that it's not explicit, but we can derive that you need korban chagiga from this mention of bakar. Yet it's still connected to the whole pasuk, and so therefore, just like v'zabachta Pesach, if you bring korban Pesach even on Shabbat, then so too, right? That's connected to bakar, which is a korban chagiga, must also be brought on Shabbat. That's the proof for Ben Dortai. Amar Rav Ashi, v'anan ta'ama difrushim neku v'nifrosh. Rav Ashi surprised at Rav. Why are you going and troubling yourself to find a proof for this person who separated him, these people who separated themselves from all the other rabbis? Look what they do. They go reject what the establishment is doing in the Bet HaMikdash, and they live far away. We don't have to help them at all. This is, by the way, a very interesting use of the word perushim, right? Perushim, which is also the word that is that in English is the Pharisees, which is the group of people that actually are the predecessors of the rabbis that had all the same opinions and interpretations on halachot and the oral law like the rabbis had. So usually we say the Pirushim are good, but in this case, the word Pirushim is being used as the separators, right? This Ben Doratai is almost like a sectarian group, just like the Dead Sea sect. They left the Bet HaMikdash because they thought it was corrupt and they're doing everything wrong. And so we can't be part of it. Ben Doratai, okay, in general, he's one of the sages, but you see here, he would not, compromise to go along with the majority. He left altogether, at least for this one day, in order to object to the interpretation of the majority of the sages. So this is used as a negative that he's a parush. He's leaving everybody else. So why should we bother helping him out? We can explain this pasuk in a different way. Nachman explained that this pasuk talking about a different case. He says, how do you know that a Pesach that is left over? For example, you designate an animal as a Pesach and then you lost it, so you had to get another one. But then you find it again. What are you going to do with that Korban Pesach? Well, you'd bring it as a Shelamim during the holiday itself. Shneimar bezabachta Pesach laHashem Elokecha son ubakar. How do you know that you do that? Because of this pasuk. V'chi Pesach min bakar ba. When it says you should bring Pesach laHashem Elokecha, you should bring it from the sheep. What do you mean bakar? What a cow? Can you bring it from a cow? V'halo en Pesach ba'ela min hakebasim or min ha'azim. We said in Shemot that you can only bring it from the small animal. Ela motar Pesach yel davar haba min hason or min habakar. Rather, it's talking about a Pesach that you had designated, but didn't get a chance to bring it as a Pesach. So then you could bring it as something that you could use as bakar. So what is that? That's a shelamim. Shelamim could be bakar, it could be anything. And so now you would take this son and you would use it the same way you would use bakar, and which is for shelamim. So that's another way that we can use that pasuk. So you see, it's not an absolute proof for Ben Doratai. All right, good. But still, we're going to wonder, how come the rabbis actually disagree with Ben Doratai and say you can't bring it on Shabbat? V'havadai korban sibur, who it's a communal offering. So communal offering like korban tamid, like musaf, like korban pesach. Why can't we bring this also? It's not an individual. Everyone agrees individual sacrifice. If I just want to bring a korban todah for myself, right? I can't violate Shabbat for that. But this is communal. אמר רבי אילעה משום רבי יהודה בן צפרא, אמר כדאי בחגותם אותו חג לאדוני שבעת ימים בשנה. So this is actually in the context of Sukkot. And it says here that you should celebrate Chag LaHashem for 7 days. Well, the question is, what do you mean 7 days? Shiva Shemona Havu. Sukkot plus Shemini Asedet are 8 days. And so this Chagotem means you're celebrating with the Korban Chagiga. Why is saying you should bring Korban Chagiga for each day of Sukkot 7 days? It should have said 8 days. Well, within every 8-day period, there's going to be one Shabbat in there. So therefore, that's why, right? So you bring a Korban Chagiga every day of the holiday, but not one. That's why only 7 out of the 8 days are when you can bring a Korban Chagiga. One of the days, you cannot. Which day can you not bring a Korban Chagiga? That's Shabbat. So that's the rabbi's proof against Ben Dortai. Last question about that. Ki ata Rabin, when Rabin came from Eretz Yisrael, he's one of the travelers. Amarti lifnei rabotai pa'amim sheyatam oseh la shisha. He says, hold on. Within an 8-day period, it could be 2 Shabbats, right? If the first and the last day are both Shabbat. And then you only have 6 days that you're allowed to bring a Korban Chagiga. And so then that questions your interpretation of the 7 days. It's not always 7 days. Sometimes it's only 6 days. Okay, that was Rabin's question. So Abaye was surprised at the question. Would the bereaved Avin, Ravin lost all his children, sadly, in his lifetime. So he got a nickname, the bereaved Avin. Would he say such a thing? This is not really a good question. Shemona la mishkachat la kelal shiva ita berov shanim. 8 days, you never have 8 days of chol in a row. There's always going to be at 1 day that is Shabbat. So that's why it's going to say 7 days. But most years is 7. Only once in a while is going to be 6 days. So Torah's talking about the general case. Most years you can bring Chagiga for 7. It doesn't have to go and also say, once in a while it's going to be 6 days, right? So his question is not a disproof. Torah's talking about the general rule. Okay, so that's the end of this stuff. But this fascinating figure of Ben Dortai reminds me of a contemporary example of Yeshayahu Leibovitz. He was the brother of Nechama Leibovitz. Very, very observant, pious person. Rabbi Shama just mentioned that Rabbi Sammy he used to come and teach in Rabbi Sammy Kassen's school. I was kind of surprised at because they're very different personalities. But he had he was 100% meticulous in all mitzvot, but he had some outlying opinions in philosophy and different and politics. And he was against the holiday of Purim for moral reasons. They killed 75,000 people. So he had objected to Purim, but he would never violate even one halacha. So what did Yeshayahu Leibovitz do? On the 14th of Adar, he would be in Jerusalem. And then on the 15th, he would leave Jerusalem. And that way, he never had a halachic obligation to read Megillat Esther. So he reminds me of a modern day Ben Dortai, right, who was meticulous in everything and part of the rabbinic community. But because he had his minority opinion, he found a way to not be in the wrong place at the right time so that he would not have to violate his personal objections. Baruch Adonai L'olam, amen v'amen.